could pull up the site rendering, please. There it is. Okay. So this map depicts the proposed project. This property has frontage on Meadow Street, which is to the north, to the right on this plan as it is situated, and on Spur Lane, which is to the south on the left side of the map as shown here. The total property size is 1.81 acres. There's an existing house on the property, which is on the northerly portion, which is Lot 1. Lot 1, 2, and 3 go from right to left as this map is oriented from north to south. North is to the right. So the existing house is on Lot 1 and has a driveway out to Meadow Street currently. Craig, if you could please go to the aerial photograph. There's one titled aerial. This shows the property from Google Maps, and you can see the existing house. There's also an existing barn on the property, which is in the middle of the property, which is proposed to be on Lot 2, which is the middle lot. As you can see from this photo, it's a large lawn. There is some woods to the back of the property, and the property is relatively flat, gentle slopes. There's a wetland to the east of the property in the woods, and we have obtained a wetlands permit for the activities we're proposing. So Craig, if you could go back to the site rendering, please.
Which one do you want? Which one do you want? Same one. 3 of 6?
Yes. All of them look the same. Yes, great. Well, it's colored. So I think that's the only difference between it and what you're looking at. Maybe.
Yeah, I think.
The figure here. Yeah, it's the same one, Commissioners. It's just Mr. Friend has colored it in.
I've colored in the building areas.
Yeah, but is it 3 of 6 or 4 of 6? Because they look exactly the same.
3 of 6.
Thank you.
I believe it's 3 of 6. I think 4 of 6 is probably the erosion sedimentation control plan, yes. So the only difference between 3 and 4 would be that 4 would have some.
Yeah, 4 is the erosion.
Erosion sedimentation controls, which aren't extensive. That's why they don't jump out. Site is relatively flat with minimal problems from an erosion standpoint. The lots include a 15-foot strip, which was acquired. And Craig, if you could go to the bridle.
What's flat now?
Actually, sheet 2, as it's titled. This sheet, which is sheet 2 of your plans, what I want to point out is that the shaded portion on the westerly edge of the property is 15 feet wide along the westerly property. It's a little bit wider along Spur Lane. This parcel was purchased by Fay Karanian back in 2004 or thereabouts from Flagler Associates. This parcel was shown on the Bridle Path Estates Plan, which Craig's called up now, and you can see I've outlined in red. This was the original subdivision plan from the 70s. And as you can see around the subdivision, there was a strip of land which is not labeled, but shown on the subdivision plan. And apparently, during some of the presentations of the subdivision, there was some indication that that would be for public access. It wasn't really defined from what I've seen. but it was shown, as you can see on this subdivision plan. And the portion of it that's on the property that is part of our application is outlined in red on this plan. Which is the reason for our request for a re-subdivision rather than a subdivision. That would eliminate the public use of that parcel. The owners aren't aware that anybody uses it. There's no, they don't see anybody using it. There's no signs. It's lawn area. In the aerial photograph that you saw earlier, it's lawn area. And as far as we're aware, public doesn't use that strip. But as part of the re-subdivision that we are requesting, that would, any subdivision, and this was approved in the 70s, that shows land to be used for public use, if that's going to be changed, it has to come back to this commission for a re-subdivision. So I want to point that out, that that's part of the main reason for our re-subdivision application. Okay, Craig, if you could go back to the site rendering, please. Sorry to make it jump around so much, but maybe this will be the last time. So we're asking for a 3-lot subdivision, lots 1 through 3, from north to south. As I mentioned, the existing house is on lot 1, an existing barn on lot 2. The red rectangles that we've shown on this plan are the proposed building areas. You can see we have 2 driveways. The driveway for lot 2 utilizes the existing drive for the existing house. So that would become a common drive until you get to the darker gray portion, which would be a new driveway into the building area for lot 2. Lot 3 is proposed access onto Spur Lane on the southerly portion of the property. The other item that staff has raised, the plan, we show the plan, we show the front yard and the side yard. We show a front yard along the westerly side of lots 2 and 3, and the side yards along the north and south property lines. The regulations really don't specify on an interior lot where these should be. We laid this out because it seemed to make the most sense and still protected the neighbors. As you can see, lot 3, there's a neighbor to the south, but actually where we show the proposed building area, because we need a drainage swale along the southerly side to protect that neighbor to the south, that building is set back quite a distance from the southerly property line. So we laid this out as the town planner has brought it up. A lot of times on rear lots, the front yard setback is where the driveway comes into the lot. This is kind of a unique layout. We could accommodate if the commission decides that the front yard should be 90 degrees to what we show. Really what that would mean is that we would have to tear down the barn, which we prefer not to do. The barn's in good shape and we'd like to preserve that barn. But if the front yard was shifted to where the driveway comes in, we would adjust the property line between 2 and 3, eliminate the barn, which would be kind of a shame. Actually, the barn's in good shape, so we would prefer not to do that. We proposed a rain garden, as you can see, to the westerly side of the property to protect the neighbors to the west. We proposed a bioswale along the westerly side of lot 2 and a rain garden on the westerly side of lot 3 to receive the water and store actually in excess of 2 times the water quality volume, and also detain all storms so there'll be no increase in runoff to the properties to the west. And the town engineer has reviewed that and agrees with our conclusion from our drainage calculations. There are water and sewer available to the 2 houses, and we've included a letter with the application from MDC confirming that there are sewer and water utilities available for these 2 proposed houses. We feel that the plan meets your regulations. If you have any questions or comments, we'll try and answer them.
Okay, Mr. Planner, do you have a report for this, these two applications?
Yes, a couple of items, one of which Mr. Friend referred to, and that is the situation with the front yard setback for lot number 3. Friend, could you, actually, let me go up and point to the picture. Mr. Friend, I measured it quickly the other day, and it wasn't clear to me that if the house is moved back 35 feet from this line, because it's currently something in the area of 30 feet, why would this line then have to move so far north as to make the existing barn non-conforming? Because the barn only needs to be 10 feet from the property line. So you've got about 10 feet that you could slide this line to the north without affecting the barn, and I think that would be enough for this lot to then switch the front yard to this side.
My question would be, the barn is taller than 15 feet. So does that now mean that it has to meet the standard setbacks? It's an accessory structure.
What does that height have to do with the location of it?
I didn't know.
Well, rhetorical question. The height has nothing to do with the location of it. The height, it's already non-conforming. It's already too tall, so you couldn't build it today. But it's there. It exists, so it's non-conforming. You can keep it. You just can't put a property line close to it that doesn't comply with our current regs, and I think you could do that. I think you could move this closer. I mean, I know you can move it closer, and I think that would then give you enough room.
If we could hold a 10-foot setback, we could make.
Just for my edification, what would be the purpose of trying to change the front of the building toward the south instead of toward the west?
To comply with the zoning regulations. You need 30.
Comply?
No, it doesn't. The front of a rear lot is where although the regulations don't specify this, they should have. It was an oversight. And in the vast majority of existing interior lots in Newington, the driveway is perpendicular to the line. I mean, the front yard is the line that's perpendicular to where the driveway is. So this is where the front of the property is, just like this is where the front of this lot is, because the driveway comes from there. So this is the front, so that's where the 35 feet needs to be.
You're saying that the regulations don't really specify that?
Correct.
Then he's in compliance with what he's doing per the regulations.
Well, agreed, the regulations don't specify.
Without us assuming, or.
But normally, the front of a rear lot is the line that's
this
perpendicular.
whole thing is not normal
Oh, no, it's
in
not.
any way, shape, or form.
Well, no, there are a lot of things going on here, but each of the individual things itself is not that unusual. Rear lots are not that unusual. What he's going to get to in a few minutes, requesting approval of a lot that does not have frontage on an improved road, that's unusual. I haven't seen one since I've been to Newington, but he'll get to that later. But the fact that these are rear lots is not that unusual. There are lots of rear lots in Newington, and the vast majority of them, the front is the line that's perpendicular to the driveway.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I think the layout that he has is good. If he had to change that per the town planner, would he have to change the layout of the house then?
That's what he's saying.
Yeah, and I don't know if it makes it as desirable where you have to turn the house there. I think he's got a nice layout there. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Mr. Sobieski.
Yes, I have a question. On the piece of Flagler Associates that's straight up, is that still public access, or is that private property, or what?
The portion that he outlined on the other plan that he...
No, going straight up, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Right between the two.
Yeah.
Probably
No,
sheet 2 might help.
Straight up, Craig. That piece there, that's what I'm asking.
Oh, that piece.
Yeah, this actually does still belong to Flagler. It's a paper street.
Isn't that part of the path system? It's not a street. It's part of the path system.
Yes.
Originally, this subdivision, they had visions of a path system throughout the whole subdivision for either walking or horseback riding or something. That's why they call it bridal estates or whatever they call it, something to do with horses. So, and it never came to fruition. There's never been horses there. I'm not aware of anyone ever using those walking paths because most of those paths are already grown over with trees and stuff. So, it's all shown on paper, but they're not really existence.
So it's basically then, it's a public domain or public right-of-way?
No, it's privately owned. Flagler, the
Right.
Flagler Corporation still owns this.
Still
They're
owns-
just
okay.
right-of-ways, I would
No,
say.
it's no, they
What is
own,
it?
it's feasible. It is an actual parcel with an identity and a tax bill and so forth. It is a parcel. It's a long
And
skinny
who
parcel.
owns the parcels?
Flagler, the developer of
The original
subdivision.
developer.
They still own it?
Just like they still own this little strip of land around here, and they used to own this until 2004 when they sold it to the Karanians.
Can I ask two, may I ask two?
Yeah, go ahead.
Two questions. One is on the paper road, the Flagler, is, if this was to go through, then that becomes, I want to use that term, the kind of that sliver on the Berlin Turnpike next to the salon. Remember that little sliver had no use? Remember, it had to come here for a rezoning of that piece? So this is, I know it's commercial to property to residential, but what you're saying is if this was to go, then that sliver is basically now not accessible from at the bottom of this Flagler. It's only accessible from would be the north, or let me, where's the north?
Well, yeah, from the Karanian property,
Me-
179.
When you go
Yeah.
north on your computer screen, up, no, it's where the Flagler
That's west.
piece, west.
Yep.
So the Flagler piece right now, the little sliver that we're talking, to your left, keep going to the, go to the center now,
Oh,
right
this
there.
one, yep.
That's the piece we're talking about.
Okay. Well, you're talking about all of it, but yes, so you.
Well, no, that's
your
the
question
piece I
is-
think Commissioner Sobolewski was talking about.
Yeah.
So, with the bottom of the upside down T now, which is the red outlined area, if this goes through, then there's no access point other than the high west side. So it becomes like a non-conforming lot to anything in town.
No, it is a lot.
It is a lot, that's what he's saying.
It does. It has an identity. You could buy this tomorrow. It is a lot of record.
A lot of record.
If
but
you
it
go to
can't
the
be
assessors,
can't be
but it's
used for
useless.
anything.
Well, that's what I'm
Yes.
saying, it goes back to kind of like the salon piece on the board.
Yes, right.
So how is that then?
But that's.
Well, the
a
good
whole
news is this is
different-
not involved. You don't have to spend any time talking about this unless you want to. This is not involved in the subdivision tonight. The only formerly public land that's
But it is
involved.
part of a current pathway,
That's
right?
correct,
Correct.
in theory.
Well, it's not in theory, it's by the
Well-
deeds and,
Well, I'm not sure because, like I said, Flagler still owns this land. They always owned it. They never gave it to a homeowners association. They never gave it to the town. It never left their ownership. I guess the homeowners on each side, back when this was originally approved, maybe they forgot that they were supposed to get a path and didn't really care. And it's 40 years, 50 years later now, and nobody really cares.
that's an
Well, we'll see.
assumption.
We'll find out. That's why it's a public hearing tonight. That's why re-subdivisions are public hearings, to give the public a chance to speak up and say, no, we want this to remain part of our open space.
And my second question is going back to the sheet 3 of 6 with that, would be north, south, east, west.
One of them?
The nondescript manner that our current zoning law states that the house would have to be moved to conform, I seem there's a gray area there, why we would, not specifically, our law is not specific, but we're gonna put the specificness of it on this applicant. I'm kinda caught between two things of making the applicant do something that is not in the rules.
That's the point that I was making when I asked the
So,
question.
I mean,
to
if
the
you could
planner.
divulge into that, why we're even discussing it when it's not
Oh.
really a rule, or.
Because it's the right thing to do. Because it was an oversight by me when I wrote that regulation years ago. It was an oversight on my part not to define where the front of a rear lot is. And that's why I then went back and looked at a couple dozen rear lots in Newington last week and found that all but a handful of them have the front yard aligned
So
perpendicular.
would it
that
not
is
be
the practice?
more proper to correct it and not hinder this process when it wasn't their fault in the beginning? And I'm not pointing fingers, I'm
Right.
just saying,
Well, I think if making this lot conform to the rules that I feel should be complied,
yeah.
but if it costs them a lot, then I'd be reluctant to press my case. But I'm pretty sure they can do it. I'm pretty sure they can provide they can get the 2 lots that they want and still comply with what I admittedly feel should be the rule.
Yeah, but if he goes back and then comes back and says, if I move that lot line 3.5 feet over, I'm out of conformity.
But he's not.
No,
He's
but
not.
what I'm saying is if the land surveyor deems it, hey, the way we have it is the only way we can do it per
But he
the
doesn't.
zoning.
But he doesn't. There is nothing stopping them from complying with the rules as I'm saying they should be.
But there is something because it's not really a rule.
It's only rule if you folks want to have rules.
No, but it's
can I
not
say?
stated, what I'm trying to say,
not
Mr.
stated
Planner,
in
it's
the
not stated in the regulation. Why are we gonna make him do something that, if it's not stated?
Because it's the right thing.
So it's the
Because-
right thing. I mean, I go 55 or I go 60. What's the right thing to do?
55, because that's the
Exactly.
law.
Exactly. It's not the
Also
law in
custom.
our book, though.
But it is your practice. It's been your practice since before you had.
And we've been
open space-
trying to clean that
your
up.
lot regs.
We monthly, yearly, and
Mm-hmm.
so all I'm saying is I don't think an applicant should be subject to an assumed rule when it's not a factual law. That's all.
Okay. Okay, you made your point, we'll take it into consideration when we deliberate. You have anything else, any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Sobieski?
Not to belabor the point, but I was looking at one of the other plans. Is there a complete path system all the way around, Mr. Planner?
Back to the, go back.
And right there, right above there, isn't there one?
It's here, up here.
Right, Mr. Chairman, but doesn't it go back out to Surrey Drive? That was my question.
Does it go to where?
Is that Surrey Drive or
This street here?
Spur? Yes.
Starts
No,
here.
no, straight up.
This one?
No, off to your left. There's a little sliver of property again, right there.
Here?
No,
This one here?
yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it
Yes.
looks like that's part of it too.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Of all these dead ends that would have come together. I see what you're saying, yeah. Interesting.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Got any other questions, commissioners? Okay, we'll open it up to the, is there another portion that he is supposed to talk about? You
Well,
just
yes,
said-
if you want to talk about the subdivision now,
Yes,
he has a request to waive the improved road requirement.
why don't you explain that to us?
Sure. On the, Craig, if you could go back to the site rendering, please. I promised the last time.
No, it isn't.
Actually, yeah, the site rendering, I
Number
think.
2.
Okay.
Sheet 2.
On the north side of this property, which is to the right side as we're looking at this plan, Meadow Street ends up in the northwesterly corner.
My friend, I think this would really be good for you to come up and point
Sure.
to it and bring the mic with you. Bring the mic with you.
I tried my laser pointer the last time, it didn't work, and I bought a new one that was brighter, and it still didn't show up on the screen. Meadow Street comes down, and the existing driveway comes into the house. Meadow Street ends right here at this point. This is a town right-of-way through here, but it's unimproved, and will probably never be improved for any particular reason. As you can see, Orchard Avenue comes down. The next street, which I don't know the name of, comes down here. These lots have frontage, and this road
Field Street.
continues down. This section isn't built and really serves no purpose, as I explained in my letter. Technically, the Lot 1 would need 200 feet, I think it is, of frontage. I need to look at my letter, but I believe. So to conform to the regulations, Meadow Street would need to be extended.
But isn't there,
200 feet.
that's an existing house? So
This isn't it, correct.
Right, so
This
the
is an
situation-
existing house.
the
so it's
situation
the-
on that lot
Exists now.
exists now, and
The driveway comes
situation
in, that-
without the road there is an existing condition.
Exactly, correct. Correct. but technically, by the regulations, we do
Yeah.
need to ask for that waiver.
Is that something that we could waive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
that-
and we can talk about the waiver procedure whenever you'd like to. You want to talk about it now?
Yeah.
Okay, I know there may be some confusion by the commission because you got beat up quite a bit a year or so ago about waiving the zoning regulations. But now, okay, I'll bring it closer. But in Connecticut, the zoning regulations come out of a completely different section of the statutes than the subdivision regulations. They're very different. And although you don't have the authority to waive the zoning regulations, the enabling legislation does not give you that ability. The enabling regulations, however, do give you the ability to waive your subdivision regulations if you wish to. And your bylaws, your subdivision regulations contain language that talks about, I think, a 2/3 vote to approve a subdivision waiver.
Okay. So to approve that, we need a two-third vote, if we choose to go that way. Okay, so that explains it. Is there anything else you have to add? No? At this time, could you please let the public come up and have their say? So at this time, we'll have the public, anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Anyone in opposition, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is David Pells. I live at 18 Spur Lane, which is the property directly to the west of the proposed subdivision. The presentation that you just heard was incomplete. When this application came before the commission as number 3118 earlier this year, I provided information to the commission regarding the creation of the public right-of-way. So what happened when the subdivision was built, the developer came to planning and zoning trying to get out of the requirement that he put in sidewalks. And the commission allowed him to proceed without putting any sidewalks on Spur Lane. And as a substitute for the sidewalks, created the public right-of-way, the 15-foot parcel, and particularly the parcel that was outlined in red on one of the maps. That public right-of-way is in use. And in particular, it is used by school children every school day to go from Spur Lane to Orchard Street where there's a bus stop. So this is not something that's been abandoned by the public. It's in use. This is the same application that essentially was rejected by this commission when it came before it as 21-07, 7-08, and 8-08.
Just to clarify, it was not denied by this commission. It was withdrawn. The application was withdrawn. The application was withdrawn.
You're talking about 3118.
Right.
All right. In 2007 and 2008, it was denied by this commission. The fact that a public right-of-way has been transferred to a private owner does not extinguish the public right-of-way. And the case law on that is very clear. And for the record, I would direct the commission to the decision by the Connecticut Appellate Court in Mulla, M-U-L-L-A, versus McGuire, M-A-G-U-I-R-E, which appears at 65 Connecticut Appellate 525. It's a 2001 case. To my knowledge, has never been overruled. So even though the property, that little sliver may have been transferred to the Karanian or the Karanian estate, it remains a public way, right of way, and should be kept as a public right of way. I don't think anyone at this point is interested in putting sidewalks in Spur Lane, and school children should be allowed to use it.
Would this subdivision procure, if the subdivision was approved the way it is, you don't think that this children could still walk on that right away?
Well,
Hang on, we're
It-
gonna change,
I mean-
hang on, we gotta change the tape. If you're saying the right of way still exists, in your opinion, still exists, and that children do use it,
right.
with the subdivision there, they could still use it, I would assume.
Well, instead of,
No, the detention pond would be where the kids walk.
Yeah, but is that a,
That's 15 feet.
and it also appears, because there is no overlay of the right-of-way on that particular rendering, but it also appears that there's a driveway going out into Spur Lane, which would impinge on the right-of-way.
I can't tell what the dimensions are, because from the other drawing that was shown, the right-of-way was started at the west property line and went 15 feet into this piece of property. I don't know what the dimensions are.
It's the 15 feet from my property to the Karanian's property. That's the 15 feet. I would also comment, I don't particularly care what happens to the barn, but I would invite somebody to take a look at it. It has not been in good shape for the 40 years that I've been there. If they want to keep it there, that's fine, but not in particularly good shape.
Anything else, sir?
I mean, the other thing, I would mention, whenever we get a good rain, there's a little river that forms along that boundary. So I don't know if the planners have taken a look at it after a rain, and I don't know to the extent to which they're going to be able to mitigate the problem. I would assume the problem is going to be worse if there's now.
At the west property line?
Yeah, if there's now, paved driveways that aren't going to absorb some of the water.
Well, that's why he's showing that rain garden in the detention area. It was reviewed by the town engineer.
Okay.
And he's saying that it works.
I have nothing further other than I would urge the commission not to extinguish a public right-of-way that is in fact in use.
Anyone else from the public, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Zofia Pelkowski, and I own a property on Spur Lane, 12 Spur Lane. I also think that the public right-of-way should stay. My kids have used it. Other kids are using it. I see it from my window or from my deck. Now my kids are much older, so they drive cars, but I see other kids using it, and I would like it to stay the way it is. On top of that, the path, not the red public right-of-way, but there's another one that you point out, which actually is the end of my property.
Yeah.
It's by the fence. I go around there, and sometimes when I do yard work, I actually walk around there. So I do use it. And also, I wanted to say that if there's going to be a driveway into Spur Lane, it's not going to be cul-de-sac anymore. There's going to be too much traffic. I was looking to buy a house on a cul-de-sac, and property on cul-de-sac is more expensive than other streets. And I think that it will create a lot of traffic, which actually we don't need, because it's very quiet and nice to live on Spur Lane. And it's going to change our lifestyle. So I am against this project.
Okay.
Thank you.
Else?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. This is in opposition to this application.
Hi, Laura Pels, also 18 Spur Lane. I know my husband mentioned about the water, but I just want you to know, probably like 30 years ago, the Newington Fire Department had to pump out our basement during one big storm. So now we do have 2 sump pumps and a battery sump pump that do go on whenever there's heavy rain, including this week, it went on. So I am concerned about how that rain garden will, protect us from any water damage, because we have had that before. Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, the applicant has the opportunity to rebut. They choose to.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Mark Friend, for the record. With regard to the comment that the transfer of the property does not extinguish the public access, that's exactly right. That's the reason for the re-subdivision. So with the Karanians did purchase the property in 2004, but we're here as a re-subdivision for that very reason. So we understand what Mr. Pell said about the public access. The applicant is not aware of. If we could go to the aerial photograph, Craig. We're not saying that nobody ever has been on that strip, but that strip is on the west side of the property, and there's no evidence that there's any continued use of that property. It doesn't mean that nobody's ever been on it, but I just want to state that the owner is not aware the public's using that strip, hasn't witnessed it. With regard to stormwater runoff, the runoff does go to that area now, and we're not changing any drainage patterns, but we are accommodating the additional runoff, and the town engineers reviewed that with the rain garden, and it's twice as large as it would need to be, so it will contain the water. Any water that's there now would stay. It won't relieve any water, but it won't exasperate the situation with the drainage that we're proposing. That's all. Yeah.
Okay. The opposition people have an opportunity to rebut. One of you can come up and rebut his rebuttal if you choose to, or we could continue with the meeting. Anyone choose to speak again at this time? Okay, hearing none. What is the?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close petition 50-18 and petition 51-18 and move it for action for the next meeting.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any comments? Any questions? Okay. We're closing the public portion of the hearing. It'll be on the agenda for the next meeting in December. and we will have discussion by the commission and action, possible action at that time.
Thank you.
That ends the public portion of the agenda. We'll move into the remainder of the agenda. Next item is approval of minutes of November 14th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any additions or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item on the agenda is new business, motor vehicle regulations, zoning regulations. I'll turn it over to the town planner.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I'm just going to recuse myself for the same reasons I've stated at the last couple meetings. Thank you.
Planner?
Okay, at the last meeting, we talked about what I think are almost two different but related goals of TPZ. One goal is to deal with the ongoing litigation between Firestone and Modern Tire and get that behind us. But the other goal, a larger goal, is to, within some guidelines, once again allow some auto-related uses in Newington where currently, well, since 2007, they have not been allowed. So those are two separate but still related items. What I would suggest the commission do to make it easier for the commission, well, easier for all of us really, is for the commission to focus on what you want the regulations to allow businesses to do in Newington, and don't worry for the moment about how that relates to the ongoing litigation. I will make sure that you don't do anything that doesn't, or at least you don't unknowingly, do something to deal with that litigation. But I would encourage you to instead focus on making the regulations better for Newington. And what is it that you want to, once again, allow businesses to do in Newington that they haven't been able to do since 2007? And that's what I would recommend you focus your discussions on.
Okay. Commissioner comments, commissioner questions. I stated at the last meeting what I thought that bringing it back to the 2007 original regulations with some modifications, and the two modifications that I had was to look at the distance requirements to a residential zone and the garage doors to facing the street. Those are the two areas that I wanted to discuss or have part of the new regulation. Now, I'll open it up for the rest of the commission. Commissioner Claffey.
Planner, Mr. Minor, with your last sentence of saying opening it up to go from 2007 to try to bring in everything to make it
Conform.
Conform, would there be anything that has gone, and you may not have that answer tonight, but something to look at, you've probably looked at it, from 2007 till now, that we allowed, that if we start changing the regs, would they become non-conforming?
Right, okay, that's a good question, and that's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I'll do some research into that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't remember any situation since I've been back on the commission.
I'm thinking of the one that comes to mind is the closeness of a drive-through window.
Yep.
Speaker box. I know we got what brings to mind is the ones that have gotten approval since I think 2007, or things that have been built, let's say, I don't want to say approval, things that have been built in the commercial zones across the town that do butt up residential zone in some format. That happens on the Pike,
And we've
there's
done
some areas where there is no commercial zone within that distance.
Well, if you're taking into consideration other commercial entities that are not part of the auto regulation, yes, we did the Dunkin' Donuts. The speaker boxes have to be 300 feet to a residence zone, and that's measured from the box to the zone line.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there were anything in.
As far as auto regulations, I don't know of any.
Right, because they haven't been allowed since 2007, up until a couple of years ago.
But as it were, as you
But there may
had
be other
said,
related things.
you had said, hey, what are some related things? And I use that very loosely,
Yeah.
but there's probably, especially on the turnpike with all the little offshoots of specialty things that have kind of developed over the years.
Yep, I'll look into that.
Any other Commissioner Woods?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually downloaded all of our surrounding communities' regulations on this and trying to put it together, because what I don't want to do is box ourselves into a corner that since I've been on this body that's come up where, and we'll use a residential line, we want it to be 100, or I'll make this up, 100 feet from a residential line. And the lot could be very deep and extend back to butt up to a residential line, meaning property line, but the business could be 500 feet away. So I think we need to make sure that we don't make it so onerous that we're not allowing it to happen in the developments. And I think we can come up with that language. I think we just need to be specific where we pick that point from. And, you know, maybe we need 50 feet, 75 feet, 100 feet, but whatever that is, 300 feet, but it doesn't necessarily need to be from the property line. It'd be from the business establishment. And what we need to come up with is language that would be able to describe where that point gets measured from.
You have a comment on that, Mr. Planner? Because normally we go from, and we talked about it at the last meeting, now we go from the property line to the zone line. That's what we do now.
Right,
And
and
that's the standard throughout the zoning book.
Right, and that would certainly be onerous for the business that has a parcel of land that's large, and the building is far away from the property line, but if the rule is we measure from the property line, then that business would be impacted. On the other hand, the business that has a lot of land, there's nothing to stop them from putting a parking lot or equipment storage right up against the property line adjacent to a residential zone. So I think we're probably going to end up with a rule that is measured from the property line and not the building. And because that's, I think, the way to be most fair for the most people, even though some individuals, some property owners are going to get screwed because they happen to have a lot of land between their building and the property line. But we'll have that discussion quite a bit through this process.
Yeah, it didn't happen, obviously, for automotive use, but on the turnpike just in the last year, we've had two, that the marijuana use on the Berlin Turnpike.
Yeah.
Because of that weird shaped lot.
Right.
You know, we have this little spur that sticks up against a residential lot, and the building is, you know, nowhere really in the.
And we took care of that
Correct. Yeah,
by the regulation.
Yeah.
On that specific instance. What was the other one,
But
Steve?
the other one is the one that we just had in front of us at the last meeting, which is the beauty parlor that's doing it over. That butts up to residential property. You know, it's 400 or 500 feet out into the woods, but that's the
But they
residential
had
property comes up
there was
against
no
it.
issue there.
No, there was no issue there, but I'm just saying.
But there could have been.
Could have been, you know.
Yeah, but it's going to be tricky.
We should take, this rule is pretty specific to the turnpike, wouldn't you say? Maybe we should take a look at what's left for vacant.
You mean elsewhere in town?
No,
That's
yeah,
problematic?
no.
Well, actually, I'll give you a good example right now, and it isn't being used for automotive, but it is the corner of Main and Hartford Avenue, right, where they tore the gas station down.
Yeah.
Now, could that go back to automotive use, and is it allowed because it was existing, now that the building's down? But that's surrounded by residential properties, so if and the distance would have to be probably 10 feet, and even then, I don't know if it makes it abuts residential property, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
I think it does.
so that would mean we would make that piece of property no longer usable for automotive use.
Yeah, there may end up being.
And I think that was the intent when they took it, they took
And they could
it
be.
out because of not specific to the turnpike, but more specific to neighborhood areas.
The reason I brought that up, and again, I don't know if they can still put another gas station up there,
I don't
but
think
it's
so.
being marketed, I believe, as automotive use, right?
it is.
And that's what it made me think of it, is I drive by the sign a lot.
Is that is that possible to advertise? Well, anything's possible, but
Yeah.
is that a true fact that does it go with the land or does it go with the?
No, non-conforming uses run with the land. Yep, whoever buys it gets to continue to operate the non-conforming use. Yep.
Okay, right, and that's what I thought. So I guess, and
Right.
that one sticks out, obviously.
But
it's glaring, yeah.
But the way it's, the way the regulations are written now, that would not meet the 100-foot, that would not meet just the way it is, per the old
Right.
So
regulations
it's
with the
exempt.
100 feet.
It would be exempt anyways.
Yes.
So we decided to make it 30 feet from a residential zone. This piece of property would be
They'd-
exempt
they'd be
because it was
exempt.
non-conforming already.
Correct.
Okay.
And that means that then someone who, said purchases or leases that land could put in a gas station back there. Even though you said
Well,
hypothetically we've changed to the new next zone.
well, but is that, you're talking about the property that has the car wash or the?
No,
the
diagonally
vacant-
across.
the empty
Oh, that's
lot,
been
the
vacant
empty
for many
Yeah,
years. That would be a challenge for the attorney for that or maybe not, for the attorney for that property owner to make a case that the owner has never intended to abandon his non-conforming use, even though it's been vacant for longer than I've been here.
Is it like if it abandons it for a certain amount of time?
No, no,
There's no
never.
time limits?
There's
okay.
The way the courts have ruled in the last few years, no, there's no time limit.
It just stays
It's,
the land.
it's all based on intent. The person has to have intended to abandon it, and if he didn't intend to abandon, if he just stopped thinking about it for a decade or so, you have to allow him to resume once he wants to.
So if again, another scenario, I guess, hypothetical, would be if he put another structure there, obviously wasn't automotive related, that would be then evidence that he abandoned it and it would no longer stay?
Wait, say that again?
Another structure
It-
went up
it
there and
was
it
a-
wasn't
was a-
for automotive use.
It was a gas station,
Yeah,
right?
it was a
Originally?
gas station,
Right.
yes.
And say someone put up a
Yeah.
office building. Now,
Oh.
that's indication that he
Yes.
abandoned the auto use.
Correct.
And then it ends.
Then it
Yes,
would
and then he could never resume with
that's
a,
fair.
with a, well, yes, right.
You spoke earlier, Chairman, about the garage doors
Right, garage doors facing the street.
facing the street. How are we gonna look at buildings that could modify I remember one on North Mountain Road? They came in, it was like a year ago. It was when that church was moving in that area. He came in and said he wanted to move the door because he can't get trucks. Is that for all zones? Because there's not many on the Berlin Turnpike right now. I can only think of one that has a garage door that physically faces the back side of the building. That's that old stereo shop right where Enterprise is. And I think there's a residential zone within X amount of feet of that,
Right.
even though I think it's the massage center of Connecticut or something that basically the door opens to.
I think the rules prohibit any commercial building from having, I'm pretty sure it prohibits any commercial building from having garage doors that face the street. It's been a topic for discussion because that's the situation with Firestone, but I think that's the rule everywhere in Newington.
Yeah, but that building, I remember that building's been there since I was a kid, and it's had a garage door there. So now I know.
That one was a loading dock, and they wanted to move the loading dock to the front of the building and take the green space away.
Yeah, that was the
That-
North Mountain Road.
Since then they've closed.
But there's two examples. The one on the Pike that's an existing building that has a garage door that opens where they used to install stereos. And then, here we go across town to North Mountain Road where someone came before us and said, hey, we want to possibly, they just hypothetically said, would it be feasible? And at the time,
Well, do you say which ones on the Turnpike? Firestone's doors face the Turnpike, Modern Tires,
no,
doors
these were
face.
facing residential zones.
Oh, residential zones.
Because if you go to the back of the Enterprise building now, which used to be Auto Sound.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, what
But
I
it-
was
but it's
talking
still
about.
But my question is, that, for as long as I've known, that has been an auto-related, I use Enterprise as an example, so no one accuses me of something here. I'm using that as an example, that as long as I've known that parcel, it's been a stereo shop or a car repair, not car repair as in engine repair, but modifications to cars with stereos, alarms. And that door is always, it faces a commercial building across, but it butts up a residential lot.
Right.
And I'm
And
just
that
saying
came
that's
to,
where
and that
that's how-
came to us, this commission, within the last couple of years, to, in a part of the, I think was the tint, was it the tint thing? Where they used that part thing to do the tinting of the car windows in.
The
And we
enterprise-
talked to them about making sure that the door was always closed and all of that stuff.
No, but what I'm saying is it gets back to Commissioner Wood's question of, as we look in deeper, you have all these, kind of, they've already been used, they've never been named, but, you know, the enterprise uses it now, I think, for washing their cars back there. I mean, it's just another, it doesn't face the pike, it faces away, just,
Mr. Wood?
If Commissioner Claffey's a little older, he might remember it as Sam's fruits and vegetables stand.
well, I'm not that old.
On the garage doors, is the intent of, or was the intent of the commission, just so they're not visible? What, because I don't see you accomplishing that goal by having them face north-south, in particular case on a turnpike, right? If anything, it actually, to me, it makes it more glaring. If you've got a building that is 100 feet long and you got 10 garage doors going down the side of it, and it's facing either north or south, you're going to see it from 400, 500, 600, 1,000 feet away, versus if the building on the narrow side facing the turnpike had the doors there. You see them either way. So if we could do it with screening, and I realize in some cases it can't be done. There isn't enough room, especially for some of the existing buildings. But other than to get some of our non-conforming uses into conforming use, I don't know how we do that.
I don't think you're gonna get 100% of all the non-conforming uses and 100%. You'll get 95% of them. We got everyone, every automotive use in the town of Newington is non-conforming. I think we get 95% of them or more. There are gonna be some exceptions that will not be conforming, and they will exist as they do today as non-conforming uses. And they continue to operate and continue to, and if they could come up with an innovative way to get into compliance, then that would be good.
But the good news for them is, if this commission does what I think they're gonna do, there will only be one nonconformity with those buildings, the overhead service doors. The use itself will once again be allowed, which is a huge improvement for them.
Yeah.
At that point, the only problem will be
Just the doors
the
become
doors.
the issue.
Yeah.
Do you have Mr. Planner, we talked about the garage doors facing the turnpike. Do you have an opinion as to why it's like that, or
That's
what the aesthetics are, or anything?
That's a rule in your regulations, and I'm just trying to leaf through it now, looking for it. But it's somewhere in your regulations, it prohibits all overhead service doors. It isn't just motor vehicle. It's all overhead service doors are prohibited from facing whatever street they're on.
well, you got the problem with the Best Buy, theirs faces the pike, they do their auto, stereos.
But it's everywhere. In fact, I remember, there are other buildings in Newington where the garage door faces the street, but the regs don't allow it. So I'm not sure how, in those cases, they came to be, because it's not just motor vehicle that the new regs don't want the doors facing the street. It's all commercial properties.
Commissioner Sobieski.
Yeah, Commissioner Aida, if I'm not mistaken, I think when the DOT built a new building, I think it was Chairman Klett, insisted that garage be turned sideways and a berm be put up and nobody can see it.
Yeah, correct.
I thought that was going to, from that point forward, that's what they were going to do. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think it was on the books before there, and I think before that, and I think that he pressed the issue with the Department of Transportation, and they conceded and turned the building, and then on top of that, put a berm in front so you can't even see the building.
berm makes the whole
The
door
problem
go
with berming the front of these buildings is eventually the plantings or whatever grows to such an extent that it blocks the building from the view of the street, and that could be problematic to the Bill's business because he has no visual presence on the street.
But I think in this particular case, it was because the fleet was parked back there, and I know when I was working, I had 3 garages been in there, my trucks and stuff, so I think that's what it was, is the automotive part of it.
I mean, we're talking about the automotive part, but I think the planner brings up a good issue, is that it pertains to all other zones too. And I know that we've enforced that. We've enforced it on North Mountain Road. I know of a couple of instances, correct, Mr. Planner?
Right.
And where we've made people turn the building or not put the garage door there, or do something different, put the garage door on the back of theirs or the side, or, and what we were trying to do was make the front of that building more aesthetically pleasing from the street. So when you look in, you're not looking, because the guy has his garage door open, you're looking into his garage area, which most instances are unsightly from the street. And that's I think the intent of why we don't want the garage doors facing the turnpike or the street area. And correct, like the Monroe muffler on the turnpike, they turned the building, but then you could still see it as you drive by. But that's one case out of.
Yeah,
Okay. Anything else on the auto issues, Mr. Planner?
Well, okay, then I'll draft an amendment for your discussion at the next meeting, which basically reinstates most of the uses that were allowed back in 2007, but still prohibits overhead service doors from facing the street. And I'll come up with something as far as the separation requirement, but I think you're going to have a lot of discussion about that. Because it used to be 50, but then in 2012 you increased it to 100.
Why in 2012, I wasn't here. What was there?
I don't recall why
I think
we
that,
did it.
Can we just look into that to kind of maybe see that
Okay,
there's an
yep.
intent of?
Yep.
Would that be
that's
good to know if it's
yeah.
valid intent now or it's invalid in the future?
Well, I think part of it is that I don't know, we're not consistent. We're not very consistent in this regulation as far as those distance requirements, because we got the speaker box. You got to be 300 feet, and then in this case, you could have in the case of the Firestone, they had doors in the back that's abutting basically, and they had to mitigate. You know the situation there, but there's other areas that are the same situation. Mr. Woods.
I think this commission has done a really good job throughout the town over the years of making the town look very appealing to the eye. I really do. And I think with the advances in technology that are coming, and I'm talking about GPS, having a 21-year-old daughter, she doesn't know how to get anywhere. The phone tells her. So where I'm going with this is, I think you spend a lot of time, this commission spends a lot of time, the people who sit around this table, trying to get to look very attractive. And you hit a very solid point. What happens is when those trees start to look like something nice, what happens? The business person is thinking, well, that's keeping customers from coming in, and they hack it down. Tree's still there, not doing what it was intended to do. I think some of that's going to go away because, again, this younger generation, the phone told me to turn right off the bridge, and that's where I go into the lake. Guess what? I'm going into the lake.
But a good example, an example that I could tell you is that you take the Joanne Fabric, old Leechmere Plaza. That was constructed a number of years ago. They had island plantings. It got to the point where they came in and request, and they went in and
Rip them off.
ripped them all down because you couldn't see the building. And the property owner, I think it was Conover at the time, I don't know who owns it now, said that, we're not getting the visibility. And that they actually went in and removed all the trees. And I think that happens at a lot of places where they go in and start trimming and pruning, and so that you get it, you get the exposure. Another example of the same thing is in Berlin, where the Home Depot is. Around that pond gets built up to where you can't see the building, and they go in and clear cut that whole pond. And I've seen them do it a number of times on that specific piece of property. So property owners want the visibility to the street.
I mean,
Yeah.
to the extent that, I remember at the Price Chopper and Dick's facility, they tore down a chunk of that building, that satellite building next to Chili's, so they could get more visibility into that plaza.
Okay, that's something that we've still got to play with, but why don't you proceed with something that we could, a little more concrete, that we could pick apart at the next meeting. So we'll keep this on the agenda. It's our regulation, and we have as much time as we need to get it right. And I think we got to get it right this time. Okay, next item is item B, the Newington Ridge, which we've already discussed. Next item is old business. There is no old business. Any petitions for scheduling?
No.
Town planners report.
Okay, the plan of conservation and development. I emailed everybody yesterday my first cut at a RFQ, and I then gave people copies tonight. I'd like to discuss it. It's 5 pages, and it's a pretty strong hint of what the town is going to want the consultant to do. So that's why I felt it was important for you folks to be on board with it. Yes, that's it. Yep, to be on board with it. And if there are changes, enhancements, fine. We don't need to talk about it tonight. We're well ahead of the process. So, and I know I only gave it to you yesterday, so we could talk about it tonight, or just wait until the next meeting to talk about it. At your
What's the pleasure of the commission? You want to talk about it tonight, or you want to wait to have the opportunity to read this and then make comments? It's up to you.
Is there anything specific that you want us to kind of have in mind as we mull over this? Is there something that, compared to the new, I mean, I read over it yesterday, nothing jumped out at me, but there's always, from a planner perspective, or from your personal experience in the past.
Well, I think the part,
Communities.
right, the part that
I mean, I don't want to belittle it tonight,
well,
but.
the one thing that for me is most important is the public participatory process. And so what I would love is for you folks to be on board with paragraph 3B, where the consultant will be required, when the expectations, part of the scope of service is that in coordination with the town planner, the consultant/firm will create and manage a creative and interactive public participation process within the project timeframe, within the budget, which shall include innovative means and methods that lead to a consensus among citizens of the town relative to a long-term vision for the community. This process shall include, but not be limited to, public meetings and digital and social media, and may include mailings and the development of a focus survey if the budget allows.
Wouldn't that be accomplished by us when we have it, that each part of every time we have our meetings, that it's open to the public for public input? That doesn't cover that?
No, it wouldn't, because that's what I want the consultant to do, to use the consultant's skills at guaranteeing maximum input than for the commission to do it.
Through the tax department.
That's why we've had that's why I suggested that we put it off until the July, so that we could put the thing in a notice in the tax bill, so that everybody in the town of Newington gets it.
But that might not be a good way to do it. There may be more, there may be better ways to get input than sending a flyer.
This discussion we took that discussion, we had a lengthy discussion about it the last time we had this town plan of development. We drafted it, and pretty much the commission came up with the opinion that would be the ideal way to get it out to every property owner that this process was happening.
Right.
So just want to state that.
Right, but that was 10 years ago. There's a whole new world. There's a whole new world of communication out there. And I want our consultant to be skilled with the new ways of getting input.
That was my question. Is this more geared toward when the proposals come in from the consultant firms, that they are well versed in past, it's like almost your qualifications in that to get, how are you gonna get it out to the people that, literally, I haven't looked at my tax bill or any notice in 20 years.
Right.
But if I get something here, and that's what you're saying, everyone's using this,
Well, as part of the interview process, let's assume we hired the 3 highest candidates. As part of the interview, they're going to tell us how they propose to maximize public involvement. And we're going to sit back and we're going to say, oh,
that's
good
what that
idea,
means.
or oh, not such a good idea.
that's why I wanted to differentiate from what I think you guys are saying is sending mailings out to people may sound good.
Well, everybody looks at their tax bill because you have to pay it, okay? So,
I don't pay it.
you don't pay your tax bill?
The
Property tax?
mortgage company pays it. I don't
Okay,
even see it.
so there's a isolated few that the mortgage companies pay, but most people,
Tenants
okay.
don't pay taxes.
Tenants?
I said there was some cases, but the majority of the people get their tax bills in town and they pay it themselves. Yes, you're right, there's some that have mortgage companies and the mortgage company pays it. But we'll be doing other things besides the one initial notification. There'll be other things that we can
Well,
do.
then what he's saying is that he wants the consultant to be able to say to us, well, you could do this, 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 and this.
Keep
That's
an
what
open
you're-
mind.
yeah,
Don't assume, that's all I'm saying.
Yep.
I think that's all he's saying is that you want the consultant to be able to say, listen, we've done a plan of development for this. And one of the ways that we got more public input and more public participation at the meetings and everything is because we did an email blast, or we did this, or so we did something innovative, different. Right. So yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, we'll listen to have them do that. That's, of course. We want as much information we want as many people in from the public to have input on this plan of development, because that's the directions that we're trying to accomplish.
One other thing. So you're gonna get a consultant in here, but can we get people who are familiar with redevelopment, not just, somebody who's gonna make the town better? And we already have enough buildings, but a lot of them need facelifts in a different direction, different types of tenants, different types of businesses being brought into town. Our economic development people should be involved in this also.
Right.
Okay,
There'll be-
what kind of consultant can you bring in here, or developers who have another vision too? This is what I can do for this part of town, this neighborhood needs this. Not just, you are looking a wider scope, but we really need to not waste our time and money here unless we're gonna really redevelop things, because
Right,
you can
Newington
see what's
is at the
going on.
point in its life cycle where redevelopment is a big part of what we do. I've said several times, I've been here 7 years now, this is the first subdivision I've seen. Because Newington is a town that redevelops rather than a greenfield development. And in a way, those challenges are even greater than the challenges of new development. And I'm not so sure that our current plan really acknowledged how challenging redevelopment is. And that is, again, something that we do want lots of public input on also.
I think a lot of that goes back to the mindset of the current resident, and I mean, no disrespect with that, is we see a lot of, I'll use an example of redevelopment. We have, how many acres on Berlin Turnpike that just got cleaned up? 24 and a half? Prime space, the old CLM2.
Oh, 33,
So
33,
that is
yep.
the mindset we have to change, and what I'm getting at is, when I see this, to Commissioner Camillo's point is, I want to see a POCD that pushes those vacant lands, outdated lands, to what is current in society and not what, it's going to ruffle some feathers in town, I know that, and that's what I think it should do. And don't hold back when we just go through this to, well, I don't want to get that person angry or that voter or that this. We have to kind of look at how to redevelop the town, because there's a lot of vacant land in town, and this, if we don't do this right, it's going to stay vacant for another. I've seen multiples that have been aged here. They haven't changed since like 40 years. And I'm only.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of vacant land. A lot of it is, most of the vacant land that we have left are either problematic pieces, have the topographical problems, slope problems, zoning problems, location problems. They're all the problem pieces that are left, because if they weren't, they'd be built on. I could tell you there's a couple of good prime pieces left, the 33 piece, there's other pieces on Payne Road, there's pieces all over the place, small pieces, but overall, there are a lot of land that's left, that's prime. If it was, it would be built on, specifically on the Berlin Turnpike. I mean, those pieces are like gold on the Berlin Turnpike. I mean, the prices.
But is our current way to do things, do you feel, and this is more discussion, I'm getting a little off, well, I'm not getting off this, but do you think the way it currently is deterring those developers to come because of an outdated old plan?
I don't know. I don't know how many people actually take that plan of developers that come in and ask, say, can I see your plan of development, to use it as a guide as to what to do? What it's going to take for redevelopment is a developer or somebody to come in and say, and acquire a couple of pieces and put pieces together and come up with some innovative ways to do something different.
We had that in 2015.
I mean, a good example is some of the pieces on the Berlin Turnpike that are underdeveloped because of the motels or the hotels, or those are prime pieces that are in my estimation, are being wasted on a motel.
and not to get off, but we did change some rules. I don't know if it's 100% been signed and dotted on the coming to this committee with what if. Can I put this on this piece of land if? And so, we talked about a few months ago, you don't have to come with a full site plan. If it's is that kind of where that can come into these play together where?
Well, one of the recommendations that a year and a half from now might come out of the new plan is for the commission in the future to deal differently with potential applicants who aren't ready to come in yet, but might like to run something by you folks. There may be some way you can do that better.
We've always allowed somebody to come in on an informal basis and explain to us what they want, and we'd give them some ideas.
Right.
So we've always allowed that.
I know, but I'm just thinking, we don't know what we don't know. There may be something that we don't realize we're doing that's having a chilling effect on potential movers to Newington that prevents them from coming to talk to you first and then decide, well, let's go talk to Weathersfield instead. Because we just don't know what we don't know.
I don't even believe we have a packet to send these people.
Well,
that's not
zoning.
I know it's not zoning, but it should be.
Well, it
One hand
could
knows what
be.
the other hand's doing.
Well, you have an economic development commission, you have an economic development director who's getting paid $90,000 a year on a part-time basis. That's his responsibility. If you don't see any activity going on in that area as far as economic development, that's where the buck stops, at the guy that we're paying.
Well, we also had him come in 15, and he said this is what we could do for a facelift and redevelop the center of town. And he was told no new development, rather pay double for taxes. That was the exact
Who
words.
said that?
Person that was sitting to my left at the time.
But I guess my question more of that is how this plays a role with, as we read through it more and more, and that's why I wanted to kind of get I didn't want to just go stale. I know we've kind of brought up a multitude of stuff, but.
Well, that's what we want to do. We want some ideas kicked around the table.
Mr. Chairman, would it be an advantage to us to maybe have everybody over the next week or two, since we have plenty of time and stuff, to pull out the 2020 plan, the existing plan, read through it, and make some mental notes on what they think needs to be changed, so that when we do come together we're either gonna have a few changes or a lot of changes. I mean, personally, if you read through here, there's a few things that have been accomplished, and then there's some new things for redevelopment, and there's maybe some additional strategies and goals. But because the town is so developed, there's not much, I don't believe, that has to be changed in here. But I do have an open mind, and I think that there'll be some things where you can improve on certain areas. But I'm just saying that it might be helpful if everybody looked through it and then we had a conversation and then we went into this. I'm not ready to talk about this. The one comment I had on this is, who's going to be hiring this?
You mean who's going to make the decision as
Yes.
to which? TBZ,
So we'll have,
our decision.
it'll be our decision, okay.
Commissioner Woods.
Which is why I think you've actually done a pretty good job, Craig, on this. And, because this is not necessarily the plan we're gonna follow, this is just putting everything on top of the table, and then as we interview, you know what, we might not want this, and that. So it's just, that's all it is. you know?
Yeah, the only problem is that it appears like this, with all this information in here, that a consultant looking at this is going to assume that we want a total reworkup of the whole plan of development, which is like, you know, throwing this one away and reworking the whole thing. And I don't know.
I would agree with you, but then that's where the negotiation is. So when we sit down, part of that interview process is, okay, we're not gonna do 1, 4, 6. Base your quote now for your proposal on the scope that we're giving you. Okay?
Mr.
I think we're
Braverman.
pretty close in terms of trying to figure out what needs to be done. But I think we could develop all among ourselves a priority matrix of things that are right, wrong, put them all in, throw them in the basket, and then say, what does it mean? How does it affect us? How do we move ahead? Maybe we can just wipe that particular line item out.
Well, that's what I think he's trying to say, is you take
I
the
think
old
so.
plan.
I agree
You take
with
the
you.
old plan, you go through it page by page and say, yeah, we accomplished this, we could get rid of that. Here's some other goals. And then when you get the consultant on, he could say, well, you guys didn't think about this, and this. And we
Right.
could say, oh, wow, and take those into consideration also.
We have to
and include it
also think about what's going to happen from this point on
for 10
in
years.
terms of how businesses are gonna be run, how technology is gonna affect the town, how people communicate with each other. I mean, there's a lot of other factors that are literally changing the way we do things. How we communicate, how we use these things, you know, and computers and you name it. There is a different way that we'll be able to communicate and we'll be able to share information. And I think that's an important factor.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What feedback have we gotten from this draft? I don't want to say proposal, 'cause it's not a proposal, it's just a draft. Is there any feedback from the town council level on
No,
what?
this.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, you know, the town council, they want their fingers in everything in this town, when they shouldn't have them, but no offense to the town council member present at our meeting, but is there anything that, we go do this, should?
Well,
This
I
is
wasn't
our
planning on
plan.
it, but if you want me to, I'll send it to all the
No,
council
but
members if
you
you
know where I'm
want.
getting at, because you have a 10-year plan.
They can weigh in, just like everybody else in the
Yeah,
public.
it's open to
No,
public.
I'm saying-
And
then
every other
where I was
department that
going
we're
with
gonna,
this is-
we're gonna outreach to all of the different departments. And if they choose to come, they can come to our meetings and have input. We will actually ask, the economic development people to be part of this plan, the Conservation Commission. All of them have to have their hands on this, or at least a look at it. But in the bottom line, this is our plan of development, the town plan and zoning, it's our responsibility. I want input from the council people, I want input from everybody. I want as much information as I could get to make an educated, plan.
Is a 10-year plan too less, too little?
What do you
When I
mean?
say you bring up, you bring a 10-year plan, you put it, let's say you put the 10-year plan in effect, it could take 2 to 3 years to get the ball rolling just for a proposal to be stamped. And by the time that building or structure or event happens, now you're back to the drawing board to a next 10-year plan? Is it, why are we only looking
That doesn't
10
get-
years out and not
Yeah, that
15,
doesn't,
20 years?
what happens is at the end of the 10 years, doesn't the old plan dies and whatever's in the basket doesn't end? It continues on and you look at another 10 years. That's the whole,
Yeah, but
and
is 10
basically.
years, looking at it 10 years short-sighted to the commission, I mean, 10 years, you blink and it's, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think, not because we're built out, maybe, 10 years wouldn't be long enough if we were,
Had
you know,
nothing.
a community in Florida and just starting up and had
Okay, no, that's-
50,000 acres
gotcha.
to develop,
Okay,
but,
gotcha.
you know.
Now I see the other
But things
side
could
of it.
change here.
I got you.
Yeah, and maybe even the next couple of decades, the law will change and towns will have to update their plans every 5 years.
Okay, I
Because
got you.
the speed of change is increasing the last couple of decades. Maybe 5 years is,
And this is mandated
years
by
is
the
too long.
state that we have to do this. I don't think if it was mandated that we would be crunched to do it as often as we do.
and something that I'm going to, I put in there, you may not have noticed it, but I'm going to definitely put the burden on the consultant to give us an implementation schedule afterwards. The current plan has like 1 page of implementation. Good plans nowadays have an entire chapter on implementation, on who is going to do what and when they're supposed to do it and how they're supposed to do it.
That's a
so,
good-
so
good
that it
point.
doesn't
Yeah.
just sit on the shelf.
We got to get updated, and we need the consultant. We need somebody the consultant has to be someone that does it. That's all they do is these plans of development, and they know the laws, and they know what we're supposed to, so that we meet the requirements of the state also. Commissioner Sobieski.
Mr. Chairman, touching on a subject touched upon a little bit earlier, maybe we should send some type of communication between you and the other chairman of the other commissions that are involved and say that maybe you should start looking at this. Let them start reviewing it at the same time we're reviewing it. I mean, the more time they have, the better off it would be, or no?
I think it's a little premature now, but I
Well,
think that's a
when we
good-
start doing
Oh, yeah,
ours. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I
definitely.
wouldn't want
I
to drop
think
it on their.
The first step is to get this,
To hire the consultant.
yeah, to hire, to get this,
Correct.
get this a draft where we agree on something, let him go and do the RFP and then bring the people in and let's get somebody on board and let them, they could start, if we had somebody on board in February or so, they could start from February to June or, and have the whole thing laid out for us basically, and then we do all the public stuff and all the other input. So we'd be talking probably in the spring where we get the other commissions and other people involved in the plan. This is really very preliminary, I think, at this point. Let's get the consultant on and have him advise us. If we're paying for him, let's get as much as we can out of him. Anything else on this? Okay, we'll leave it on and we'll
Discuss it for the next meeting.
yeah,
And
but I think at
had
some point in
some
time,
changes
we gotta make this draft into so everybody please read it so that in the next meeting, we could move forward with, so that
I
Craig
have a
can
question.
start.
Is
Go ahead.
this draft in a text document or a PDF document that can be edited?
I can give to you in text.
Can you get it to me in text?
For sale cars and trucks?
Okay, anything else on planners?
No,
Okay, communications,
I don't have any.
The last 2 CROC meetings have been canceled for snow.
okay.
But I did send out the last report. Hopefully, everybody got it from Kimberly.
Public participation, Gail, you want, no? Remarks by commissioners, Commissioner Claffey.
A few things for the planner to look into. You ready?
Let me turn the page. Start with a fresh sheet.
I have a whole list, but I'll leave it to a few.
My copy of it.
The new pizza place being built on the Pike, that new parking
yeah,
lot
Artichoke?
configuration.
Yeah,
Did it get changed where the Porta Vallarta and the parking lot for the pizza joint were gonna join?
Okay, yeah, I know what you're referring to. No, they did not get our permission to do that. When we found out that they had done it unilaterally, we told them, time out, that was not on the approved plan. You need to either reinstate it or come back to P&Z for site plan modification.
Well, they've
I'm not, I haven't seen what you're talking about. Explain it to me what they did.
Okay, so,
Huh?
remember before the, this gets back to a complaint I
I'll go look
lodged
tomorrow.
as a TPZ member, where Usella eyeglasses ended, That
Yeah.
was the end of the building.
Yeah,
And you had a strip of parking and you had 2 dumpsters. Then there was a grassy area there that divided the back of Puerto Vallarta and the side lot line of, so that was all grass, never been a road.
okay,
And that's where that little sliver of land was changed.
okay.
So then they came in here, we changed it, we approved their new plan to put.
And what did they do? They put a
So
cut
now there's
through?
there's a whole, the curb and everything's in, and it's compacted, now, I don't know if it's paved yet, but now that you could drive into that new lot that was combining only the salon and the new pizza joint, now it's parking and driveway to get through to the,
I thought there was an island there.
no, they've taken everything out. and
Was
it's
it
a
part
road.
of our plan, there was
Yeah,
there
it
was
was
a
gonna stay
division?
as a grassy
Yeah,
knoll or
division.
whatever you wanna call
Well,
it.
if they can't do that without coming back to us
They-
and
they-
asking for a modification, then I don't know if we'd even agree to that.
Well, just bringing it up, I drove by it the other day filling with
What are you gonna
gas.
do, what are we gonna do
That's-
about it, Mr.
There's
Planner?
nothing, no, don't worry about it. It's under
That's
control.
number one.
We got it. It's under control. That
Okay.
we have that,
Okay,
yep.
number 2 is Blythe, the Grantmore, multiple open and vacant structures. There's nothing,
Okay.
I know it's condemned, but
If this is a blight complaint,
Right.
then there's the mechanism every citizen needs to go through to complain about blight.
But
And
it's a
you have
safety.
to go through that process because that was hard negotiated with the town council.
It's a safety
so now
concern.
Blythe is not part of zoning.
Blythe
or
is
part
not
of the
part of-
TPZ.
Correct.
CEO, whatever you call it,
Correct.
CEO.
Well, he is the CEO is
It
is the mechanism
Yes.
that you complain to, and he's the one that enforces it.
But
But we
blight
don't have
complaints have
any.
to
Okay, I
go
just wanna
through the
make, I remember
manager.
when Mike
Yeah.
was here, he'd be here, I'd say something, he'd say, okay, I'll look into it.
For zoning things, but not for blight things. He
I
cannot,
things have to go through the town manager.
there's this,
Okay, but we used
Yeah.
we used to discuss at these meetings for
Yeah.
multitude
Is
of
that blight or
years,
is that
blight-
safety though?
Blight, safety,
it may have
it's,
felt like that,
could've.
but it
Gotcha.
was,
okay.
it was never
It's a
blight.
safety, it's.
Isn't it
both.
a
It's
safety
more
and a
safety.
zoning? Isn't it a safety
is-
zoning matter instead of a blight issue?
I'm just saying, if you have a zoning complaint, keep talking. If you have a
So I'll
blight
say a
complaint,
zoning complaint for open and vacant structures?
and
What?
what's the zoning violation? You're not sure, but you want Andrew to look into it. Okay.
The doors are open night and day.
Yeah.
Okay.
People-
I mean, I'm
people
I'm
coming and
fine with
going,
also,
there's-
Yeah, it's probably
also
not a
sending
zoning
it to
violation, though.
Chief Clark.
That sounds
Oh,
like a
it's-
building
it's a
department
Okay,
issue.
it-
Isn't that a building department issue
Could
that
be.
they're using a building that's
it supposed to be
structurally not
closed?
sound or whatever?
But then it also rolls into the zoning side of things, and that's why I bring it up.
Okay.
Because those structures, and we've discussed this, but it goes upon deaf
All right,
ears
just find out what's going on with Grantmore.
about living in hotels. But hey, in zoning, it says you can't do it, but I guess this town allows.
But have you talked to any of the departments that are involved with that?
I've asked the department here to look into it year upon year, but it goes
Okay,
nowhere.
the police department, the health department, the building department,
But it's a zoning
the
law
fire
that you
marshal,
can't use a hotel
they
as
all
an
are
apartment.
very involved. In fact, there's an entire coalition. There's been a task force assigned to work on the human trafficking and all kinds of
I'm not,
issues.
I'm talking
So-
about our zoning law states, hotels cannot be used as apartments.
Yes,
And we have,
but we don't enforce that, you realize.
Well, why can't we
why
enforce that?
can't we?
We don't, we never
Well,
have.
we should enforce it
Wonder
because
why no development
that's
comes
why
to
we
town.
have drug trafficking, that's why we have the human trafficking, that's why we have all the problems we have. And there's mechanisms in our charter to deal with that. So Anthony is correct, he's gonna bring this to the zoning enforcement officer and he needs to enforce this because I think, and if we have to bring it to a vote, it has to be dealt with.
It's bad.
It's a huge problem, obviously, and it's bigger than just zoning.
But it is a zoning law that it shouldn't happen in town, but we kind of
We have.
close our eyes to
I
it.
have to, I have to
Bigger
go
problems.
along with what, partly what he's saying,
No, I-
because there's a one hotel that advertises apartments. Do you rent an apartment? And I don't know, I think it's the Swan, with the White Swan, or one of them, the
plead
Carrier or something, right on their sign out in front says apartments for rent, and they're not apartments, it's a motel.
I'm not bringing it up, it's very, it's very problematic for me to sit here on the zoning and we kind of turn an eye this way on certain things and we turn an eye this way, but then we want to know the social security number of the guy who put in the complaint, and he sits right here. So, I'll move on to my next one.
Go ahead.
The parking and site plan at the axe throwing location. Not against the axe throwing, but I am against that they're parking up on the lawn. The owner of the property allows 18-wheelers to park that take up the spaces for the occupants for that business. So at night, you have cars that are almost out to Fenn Road now. Great that the business is booming. Nothing against the business, but I still have some issues with the parking. And that, not just for them, but I kind of see how we've changed parking regulations or proposed changes, and it's hurting the business.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing's happening with the parking lot at Fenn Road at the Stop and Shop Plaza. It's now, part of it's becoming like a commuter lot. Trucks, 18-wheelers, box trucks, they sit there all day long, and then they move up, they come on the weekend.
And where is that?
The Fenn Road Stop and Shop parking lot. It just, it kind of, you go through there at 10 at 11 at night when when Stop and Shop is closed, or even later, and there's just abundance of cars. And I don't know where they come from, where they go.
They're restocking everything at night, too.
Right, okay.
These are all at the and then the last thing is the old Elmwood welding site. They've been working on that for 6 months now, no silt fences.
Okay, hang on, so right now the first one, the late night parking at the Fenn Road Stop and Shop. Okay.
Well, it's all day, like, there's always something, it just doesn't seem right. And now we're moving.
Stop and Shop
I don't know if
Plaza.
the parking is, you can't even get a spot because there's so many cars there. The Elmwood welding site, two things, any site plan modifications
Okay,
that we needed to look at?
what is Elmwood Welding?
Fenn Road.
The Fenn Road.
I mean, the
Where the
trust.
trust company moving in.
Fenn Road,
Oh, the Newington Trust Company. Okay, what about it?
Did they submit any site plan? They're doing a lot of earth moving over there.
Right, they are. Right, they decided to put an addition onto the building that just stays below the threshold of requiring site plan approval. They specifically
Addition?
designed it to be 10%. Yeah,
They're doing
10%
so many-
less doesn't have to come before you.
Well,
Yeah,
that was in your opinion, maybe, but maybe not in this commission's opinion.
it's in the
I'm-
regulation.
Well, they changed everything over there. They're not complying with silt fencing. They're not, they're making major changes throughout the whole parcel. We've made people come in for a site plan, not a public site plan, but just a site plan to review things.
If the regulations don't require it, then we can't make people do
Clear-cut
things
the
we
whole
want
lot.
them to, just because we want them to. The regulations have to give us the authority.
I'm more of, I never saw it. If it seems odd that they're gonna be able to pull their trucks in and out in that little driveway they have in the front. That goes to nothing, because they blocked in the door, now it's all blocked. So I
Okay.
see a little driveway.
Right, so,
I don't know how they're gonna pull in a truss truck, 18-wheeler, to get their trusses out of the building, because they blocked up the front door that the truck used to drive into.
okay, but why do you care?
Why do I care? Because I've seen the whole lot from left side to right side get clear cut.
Okay, I'm still waiting to hear a zoning regulation, because clear cut is not a zoning
So no,
regulation.
they're not required to show if they're gonna change the street curb cuts in or anything
Nope.
like that, no parking lot?
Yes, if they change the approved parking, then that would
Was the
require.
approved parking? None of
There
us
was
as
no approved.
commissioner, there was
There
none.
was no approved parking,
Then
okay,
they,
so.
then they haven't changed, then they haven't changed. the appro-
I'm just saying it's-
You're purposely trying to deceive the regulations here almost, just to make it easy for them, and this was a complete remodeling of that plan, and it probably should have come to us.
I feel very strongly that the regulations have to back up everything I tell somebody. I know my predecessor did not have the philosophy, and I don't know how he did that, because my guiding philosophy is always, when the applicant or someone asks me, where does it say that in the zoning regulations, I need to be able to show him where it says that.
Yeah, and they're increasing the parking, so when you increase the parking, it calls for a site plan.
That's not what it says.
Yes, it does. It
No, it
says
says
increasing parking, right?
I don't think the word increasing is in there, and I split hairs because
Change
every
parking?
word. All right, we'll take a
I'm
look at
more
it.
asking because I've never seen a car parked there in the 5 years I've lived over that side of town. But
Didn't they used to put all storage tanks in there and stuff like that?
it's-
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
all that
you
comes
know.
out of there is mud now.
Right. Here are the things that trigger site plan approval by TPZ. An increase in the amount of parking. So if they're doing that, then that would require site plan approval.
They're doing that.
Changings to loading or access,
They're doing that.
that would require it. Increases to the building's gross floor area by more than 10%. They've stayed at 10%. And then alters the site's parking lot green space, landscaping, or increases the amount of buffering required in section 6.10.
So if you
So
clear
they
cut
did
a
everything
whole
but the-
lot
So-
from left to right, that's not changing the buffering?
It might
Without
not.
a plan?
It might not change the amount of buffering required by section 6.10. It may not.
You didn't have a plan of what was existing to what was.
Oh, I'd
new.
go out and take a look. I could see if it was.
Well, it
but how
clearly increased the parking, it clearly changed the loading and zoning area. So, I mean, maybe they didn't increase, maybe the addition wasn't above the 10%, but they clearly changed other things on there, so.
All right, we can go out and look and see if they've increased the amount of parking, because that would then trigger a
Well, I
site
wouldn't
plan
know, it's
approval.
mud now, from, literally, there is no parking, it's complete dirt from, the only part of pavement that's there is the apron at the right-hand curb cut, which would be the north curb cut, there's a little curb cut where all the mud flows out because of the water, and then it's about the easement, or whatever the setback is for the right-of-way, is pavement, and then when you go to the old original driveway, which just, I think at the time, went up to the building, because there was a door there, a garage. Ever since then, I've only seen mud and tore up from the left of the building to the right of the building. I've never seen a parking lot there. There was probably bituminous up there, but I've never, it's been so long vacant, I've never seen a car up there parked in 5 years, because it's been vacant. So I wouldn't know what the existing conditions look like, and that's why I'm bringing it tonight to you to say, you know, from the.
Okay, we'll look into it.
When they built that building, they blasted, it was ledge, and that's all the gravel that was there. But there's also a spring on the north end of the property that flows down that driveway, that's the mud he's talking about. Because when they cleared the land, they put all the debris on top of the spring, and that's why but it flows year-round, freezes in the winter, and our highway department has to sand it and salt it to keep it from going into the road.
Oh, isn't that a problem, a drainage
yeah.
problem?
Before-
That
before
that
the
should be,
property-
that should be part of
If
a
they're
site plan?
if they're creating an erosion problem, then yes,
The
it's
property
TBZ has
changed
jurisdiction. yeah.
hands. The Army Corps of Engineers was there at the beginning of the year, this year in April, and they were looking at it. And I never heard another thing about it.
Yeah, I think they gotta come in, we gotta look at this thing. What do you think, Stan?
Invite them to the table.
I think so, because
Steve knows the
apparently there's a
property
lot
pretty
more
well.
changes than when I went by and saw it, so.
But, I mean, those guys are doing a nice job, they really are on that property. Compared to what it was, I mean, it looks great.
No disrespect to what they're doing there, it's just.
Anything
We
else,
make-
Anthony?
No,
Any
that's
other-
it. Well, I do have more, but I'll put it in an email and send it with my name, address, and who's the complainant to appease our town council.
I think the town council, that came from Dominic Payne. Talk to Dominic Payne, don't talk to the town
No,
council.
I meant, and my other issues that have not been addressed in town, so I don't get called on the carpet of who's the anonymous TPZ member making these complaints, because at the time, the complaints you will get have been here for 5 years.
Okay.
So, haven't seen change, and I'd like to see change, as a resident, not as a TPZ member.
Any other commissioner things for the planner, Mr. Payne?
The sign on PC Richards? Big
Oh, their
banner,
holidays, their
Mattress
Christmas tree
sale?
one?
mattress sale.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
been up for a while. At one time they came in, and it appears that they ignored coming in this time.
Okay. we will
Okay,
get on that.
Now, let me ask you that, would they have to come back in if they only use it for, say, 10 out of the 25 days?
We said that they have to come in every time,
I just wanna make.
even if they had, even
After
if,
25 days.
yeah, even if they, yeah.
I think they use their 20, I don't know how we calculate who.
Well, that's up to the zoning enforcement officer to be able to keep track of that.
Yep. Okay, I'll have them go and take a look.
Okay, please, have Andrew, right?
Yes.
Have Andrew, take a ride down the turnpike, as it's starting to get, the signs are starting to pop up again. So he's gotta be a little vigilant on the temporary signs. He's gotta travel that road at least once a week, because they pop up like weeds. I counted it more than a dozen the last time I was down the turnpike, which I go down every day.
And I did explain to him that what he's expected to do is, as Mike did, have a route of business areas in town that would take about an hour to drive, And it would probably have to be at least 3 or 4 different routes and do each of those couple times a week. So he's on that.
Are you still
Go ahead.
sending out the sign permits that have been approved?
We haven't gotten any since
Can we
I think it was
kind
the
of
holiday one.
send something out, because I'm seeing it on the Fen Road, and I don't think you would have approved 2 temporaries out in front of us.
That's what I'm talking about. He has to go out. He has the list of
We
the
used to have a
he has the
report that would
list.
come out.
Yeah, he has
So
the
we
list of
wouldn't
the
have to call you
temporary
like, "Oh, yeah,
signs.
Good, good, good.
He should have the list of the temporary signs, and if it's not on that list, then it's a temporary sign. He should either take the sign, if it's in its right of way, throw it in his car, or go to the property owner, and you should talk to him and do not what Mike did, and I'm not criticizing Mike because I liked him. He's gotta be able to go to the people and not come back to the place every time and write up a report and do it. He's gotta be able to go to the property owners and say, hey, listen, you got an illegal sign, can you take it down? He's got to be able to get out of the car and go talk to the manager, whoever it is, or the property owner, and he could eliminate 90% of his problems in paperwork by getting them right on the spot. Can't be afraid. As Mike was, I don't know, he was afraid to go talk to the people because we asked him several times, go in and tell the guy to take the sign down. And you save yourself coming back and writing it up. Maybe 90% of the people say, "Oh, I didn't know I couldn't do that," and take it down. And he could eliminate a lot of this sign, free up some of his time for something else. But he's got to be able to go out and talk to the people and talk to the business owners and tell them what's wrong. And the stuff that's in the right of way, if he can, take the signs and throw them in his car.
Yeah, if it's safe. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I had one more thing. At the few meetings ago, at the October 24th meeting, I was criticized for not providing information for the chief. I just want to, after reviewing the minutes, which I asked the staff to do, Craig Minor stated on October 10th, the chief is supposed to have his report by the close of business on Friday. That's the 19th. That's the reason why we left the meeting open, is because the report was coming in after our 10th meeting, and so we kept the meeting open so that we could receive the chief's report, which we still never received on the 24th. So I just want to get that all straight for the record. Thank you.
There was a question of you all, and it was a question Mike Fox questioned him as to, what happened, why, and there was some back and forth between Fox and him. And so I think he's trying to clarify what happened. And that was the reason, because the chief was supposed to send it and it never got to us before the meeting. So we kept the meeting open because it was after the meeting date. Okay, so that's it. Anything else?
That's it.